The day Commander Vrell announced the closure of the Galactic Military Academy, I thought I had seen everything in my 30 cycles of service. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. Let me set the scene for you. The Academy, perched on the fourth moon of Targus Prime, had been the crown jewel of the Coalition's military training program for over 200 standard years. Thousands of cadets from hundreds of species had passed through its halls, learning the fine art of not dying horribly in space combat. It was prestigious. It was legendary. It was also, according to Commander Vrell's accounting department, bleeding credits like a punctured fuel line. Economic sustainability, Vrell had bellowed during the announcement, his three eye stalks quivering with what I assumed was either passion or indigestion. We cannot continue to fund an institution that produces soldiers faster than we can find wars for them to fight. The irony of achieving peace being bad for business was not lost on anyone present. But orders were orders, and within 3 rotations, the Academy would shut its doors forever. The staff would be reassigned, the cadets would be sent home, the facilities would be sold to the highest bidder, probably some mining corporation looking to strip the moon for its mineral deposits. I am Kruntok, by the way, Junior Administrator for Facility Operations, which is a fancy way of saying I made sure the toilets worked and the food synthesizers didn't poison anyone. Not exactly glamorous, but someone had to do it. The evacuation process had been running smoothly for the first 2 days. Cadets packed their belongings, staff sorted through decades of accumulated files and equipment, and everyone pretended they weren't sad to see the place go. Everyone except the humans, of course. Humans. Why is it always humans? There was exactly one human at the Academy when the shutdown was announced. A child, if you can believe it. Her name was Mira Kowalski, age 12 by Earth reckoning, which translated to something like, well, still a child, by any reasonable species standards. She had arrived 6 months earlier as part of some cultural exchange program that someone in Coalition bureaucracy had approved without reading the fine print. Specifically, the part about her being accompanied by her emotional support animal. The animal in question was a creature from Earth called a honey badger. Now, I had encountered many Earth creatures during my years of service. Dogs, cats, those chatty birds that never shut up. Harmless, mostly. The file on honey badgers, however, should have been printed in red ink with flashing warning lights attached to every page. Mellivora capensis, the database read. Small carnivorous mammal. Native to Africa, Middle East, and Indian subcontinent. Notable characteristics. Extreme aggression, remarkable fearlessness, thick skin resistant to most predator attacks, powerful jaws, large claws, reputation for attacking animals many times its size. The file concluded with a note that still gives me nightmares. Recommended threat level. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not make eye contact. Do not exist in its general vicinity if possible. The badger's name was Gerald. Not Destroyer of Worlds or Fang of Death or something appropriately terrifying. Just Gerald. Meera had named him after her grandfather, which apparently was meant to be endearing. It was not. On day 3 of the evacuation, I was conducting my final rounds of the East Wing dormitories when I heard it, shouting. Not the organized kind you hear during drills, but the panicked, everyone is about to die kind. I rounded the corner to find Commander Vrell himself, all 200 kilograms of gelatinous X-Archon authority, pressed against a wall. His ceremonial uniform was torn, his eye stalks were retracted in fear, and standing between him and freedom was Gerald. The honey badger was perhaps 60 centimeters long, massing maybe 12 kilograms. It should not have been intimidating. It was absolutely terrifying. Gerald's black and white fur was bristled up, making him look twice his actual size. His small dark eyes held the kind of malevolent intelligence usually reserved for master criminals and tax auditors. He was making a sound, something between a growl and a hiss that translated roughly to, I will end you and everything you love. Kruntok, Vrell squeaked, which was impressive given that Zarkons don't technically have vocal cords. Do something. What, exactly, did he expect me to do? Reason with it? Offer it a biscuit? I had seen Gerald bite through a reinforced security door last month because someone had closed it too loudly near his nap spot. Sir, perhaps if you remain very still. I am very still. I have never been more still in my entire life. That was when Meera appeared. walking down the corridor with the casual confidence of someone who had absolutely no idea how much danger everyone was in. She was small, for a human child, with dark hair pulled back in what humans call a ponytail, and bright green eyes that held far too much mischief. "Gerald, come here, please." Please note the word please. As if the harbinger of destruction understood politeness. Gerald turned his head, saw Mira, and immediately transformed from apex predator into, well, still an apex predator, but one that apparently had a soft spot for this particular tiny human. He waddled over to her, making happy chirping sounds that seemed biologically inappropriate for a creature of pure violence. Mira scooped him up like he was a stuffed toy. Gerald snuggled into her arms, looking for all the world like a normal, harmless pet. Commander Vrell made a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. "Child," Vrell managed once he had convinced his eye stalks to emerge again, "your creature attacked me." "Gerald doesn't attack people without reason," Mira said calmly, scratching behind the badger's ears. He was making a purring sound now. "I didn't know honey badgers could purr. I wished I still didn't know." "What did you do?" "I did nothing. I was simply walking through the dormitory corridor." "You were probably going to her room," I interjected, checking my datapad. "This wing is scheduled for final equipment removal today." Mira's expression changed. The cheerful child vanished, replaced by something harder, older. "You're taking my stuff?" "The academy is closing," Vrell said, recovering some of his authority now that Gerald was no longer actively threatening his existence. "All equipment must be cataloged and reassigned. Your personal belongings will be shipped to Earth via the next available transport. This is my home. This was a temporary assignment. Your home is Earth. Earth hasn't been my home for 3 years." Mira's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "My mom died when I was 9. Dad's deployed with the Coalition fleet. He thought sending me here would be safer than dragging me across combat zones." I felt my respiratory slits flutter with what humans would call a sigh. Of course, there was a tragic backstory. There was always a tragic backstory with humans. "Nevertheless," Vrell continued, trying to sound sympathetic and failing miserably, "the decision has been made. The academy closes in 3 days. You will be transported to the nearest human colony for placement with social services until your father can be located." "Social services." Mira said the words like they tasted bad. "You mean dumped in some orphanage on a colony I've never been to with people I don't know in a place that definitely doesn't allow honey badgers? Regulations regarding exotic fauna are quite strict on most colonies. Gerald isn't exotic. He's family." I could see where this was going, and I really didn't want to be in the middle of it. But Commander Vrell, in his infinite wisdom, decided to push the issue. "The animal will be placed in appropriate facilities. There are several zoos that—" Gerald's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto Vrell. The purring stopped. "Sir," I said quickly, "perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements." "There are no alternative arrangements. The academy is closing. This is not a negotiation." And that, right there, was the moment everything went sideways. Mira set Gerald down gently. The honey badger sat at her feet, watching Vrell with the intensity of a missile guidance system locking onto a target. Mira crossed her arms and tilted her head slightly. A gesture that I had learned meant a human was about to do something monumentally stupid and probably effective. "Commander Vrell, I challenge you." The corridor went silent. Even Gerald stopped growling. "You what?" Vrell's eye stalks tilted in confusion. "Coalition Military Code, Section 7, Subsection 4, Paragraph 12. Mira recited from memory. "Any cadet or staff member who disputes a command decision has the right to challenge said decision through trial by combat, competitive examination, or strategic demonstration, provided at least 3 neutral witnesses are present and the challenger has not exceeded their species' juvenile status." I pulled up the code on my datapad. She was right. It was an ancient regulation, dating back to the Coalition's founding, meant to give younger species a voice in military matters. It had never been invoked as far as I knew, mostly because the juvenile clause made it impractical. But Mira was definitely a juvenile. And there were way more than 3 witnesses now. Cadets and staff had emerged from various rooms, drawn by the commotion. Vrell's gelatinous body rippled with irritation. "This is absurd. You're a child. I'm a cadet. I'm enrolled. I attend classes. Section 7 doesn't specify combat readiness or age requirements beyond juvenile status. It just says, juvenile. I qualify. The purpose of this regulation was to prevent exploitation of young warriors from developing species, not to give children veto power over command decisions. Then you should have written it better. Oh, I liked this kid. Terrible timing, questionable judgment, but I liked her. Vrell was turning a color I had never seen a Xarkon turn before, something between purple and green. Fine. You want a challenge? What are your terms? If I win, the academy stays open. At least this section. At least for cadets like me who have nowhere else to go. And when you lose? If I lose, Gerald and I will leave quietly. No fuss. You can shut down whatever you want. Vrell considered this. I could practically see the calculations running through his brain. The kid was 12. Even if she was human, even if humans had that ridiculous reputation for being unpredictable and stubborn, she was still a child. There was no way she could win any reasonable challenge. Very well, Vrell said slowly. Trial by strategic demonstration. You have 48 hours to present a scenario that proves the Dable Academy has value worth its cost. If you fail, or if your demonstration is deemed insufficient by a neutral panel of judges, you accept the closure without further protest. Deal. They actually shook on it. Well, Vrell extended an eye stalk, and Meera shook that, which was probably the most dignified compromise available. As the crowd dispersed and Vrell oozed away to file the necessary paperwork, I approached Meera. Gerald eyed me suspiciously but didn't attack, which I chose to interpret as progress. That was either very brave or very stupid, I told her. Probably both, Meera admitted. But what else was I going to do? Let them shut down the only home I have left? You realize you have to actually win this challenge, right? Vrell isn't going to give you any slack just because you're young. I know. She looked down at Gerald, who was cleaning his claws with disturbing thoroughness. That's why I'm going to need help. What kind of help? Meera smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me deeply uncomfortable. The kind that involves showing them exactly why humanity earned its reputation, and why you don't mess with a kid, and her emotional support, honey badger. I should have walked away right then, filed my final reports, collected my severance pay, and transferred to some nice quiet administrative post where the most dangerous thing I had to deal with was paperwork. Instead, I heard myself say, "What do you need?" Because here's the thing about working with humans. Something every species in the coalition learns eventually. When they get that look in their eyes, the one that says they're about to do something crazy, you have two choices. You can run away and watch from a safe distance, or you can strap in and see where the ride takes you. I had been playing it safe my entire career. Time for a change. First, Meera said, pulling out her own datapad, we need to know exactly why Vrell wants to shut down the academy. Not the official reason. The real one. Economic sustainability was pretty clear. That's what he said. But the academy's been running at a loss for decades. Why shut it down now? What changed? Smart kid. Dangerous question. I pulled up the financial records, the ones that required administrator clearance to access. The numbers told a story. And it wasn't the one Vrell had presented. Oh, I said softly. Oh, what? The academy isn't losing money. It's making money. A lot of money. From training contracts, equipment sales, research grants. The facility is worth more operational than closed. So why lie about shutting it down? I scrolled further through the files, feeling my respiratory slits tighten with each new piece of information. Because someone wants to buy it. A private corporation. They've made an offer, contingent on the facility being vacated and the staff dispersed. If the academy is operational, coalition regulations prevent the sale, but if it's closed, then Vrell can sell it to the highest bidder and pocket a commission. Meera's voice was flat, angry. He's shutting down the academy for profit. We can't prove that. The contract is sealed behind security protocols I can't break. But you know people who can, right? I looked at her. This tiny human child with her ridiculous emotional support apex predator, and realized I was already too deep into this to back out now. I might know someone, I admitted. But even if we prove corruption, Vrell has already filed the challenge paperwork. You still have to win the strategic demonstration. Leave that part to me. Mira knelt down next to Gerald, who had started investigating a nearby ventilation grate with entirely too much interest. I have an idea. It's a little bit insane, definitely dangerous, and probably violates at least a dozen safety regulations. So, a typical human plan then. Exactly. She grinned. How do you feel about breaking into the restricted training sections? The ones that have been sealed. For safety reasons? The ones with live ammunition, unstable gravitational fields, and biohazard warnings? Those are the ones. I made a sound that roughly translated to resigned acceptance of one's impending doom. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? Probably, Mira said cheerfully. But it'll make a great story. She wasn't wrong about that part. 47 hours until the challenge demonstration. No pressure. Breaking into restricted sections of a military academy sounds more impressive than it actually is, especially when you have administrator access and a detailed knowledge of which security cameras have been broken for months because the repair budget got diverted to the commander's new office furniture. Still, I felt like a criminal as Mira, Gerald, and I slipped through the maintenance corridors toward Training Section 9. Section 9 had been locked down 8 years ago after what official reports called an unfortunate incident involving experimental gravity, manipulation, and 3 very unlucky maintenance bots. Unofficial reports suggested the bots had been liquefied. Nobody wanted to test the equipment after that. This better be worth potential jail time, I muttered, bypassing the door lock. Trust me, Mira said, though her reassurance would have been more convincing if Gerald wasn't currently trying to bite through my ankle joint. Apparently, he had decided I was acceptable company but still needed to establish dominance. Typical. The door hissed open, revealing a cavernous space that looked like someone had combined an obstacle course with a physics nightmare. Platforms floated at random heights, some spinning slowly, others stationary. The walls were lined with weapon racks, most empty but a few still holding training rifles and what looked like neural disruptors. In the center sat the crown jewel, the Tactical Scenario Simulator. The TSS was a holographic combat system capable of generating any battlefield situation imaginable. It had cost the Coalition more credits than my entire salary for the next century, and it had been gathering dust for nearly a decade because nobody could figure out how to operate it without causing catastrophic system failures. Tell me you know how to work this thing, I said. Not exactly. Mira was already climbing onto the main platform, Gerald scrambling up beside her with disturbing agility. But I've been sneaking in here for months. I figured out some stuff. You've been what? Sneaking in. The lock on the east maintenance tunnel is broken. Has been since I got here. I come here to practice when everyone thinks I'm in my room. Of course she did. Why would a human child follow rules when breaking them was so much more interesting? Mira pulled out a data chip from her pocket and inserted it into the TSS control panel. The machine hummed to life, lights flickering across its surface like digital lightning. Holographic screens materialized in the air, displaying code that scrolled too fast for me to read. What's on that chip? Modified training protocols. I've been adapting them based on actual combat footage from the Coalition database. She grinned. Turns out security on archived battle recordings is pretty terrible. Nobody thinks a kid would want to watch ships exploding and soldiers fighting for survival. That's disturbing on multiple levels. I prefer to think of it as educational. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface. Here's the thing about the academy that everyone forgot. It wasn't built just to train soldiers. It was built to test them, to push them past their limits and see what they're really capable of. The TSS powered up fully, and suddenly we were standing not in a dusty training facility but on the bridge of a Coalition warship. Holographic crew members rushed around us, shouting warnings about incoming fire. Through the view screen, I could see enemy vessels closing in, their weapons charging. Vrell wants proof that the Academy has value, Mira continued, adjusting settings on a control pad that appeared in her hand. So I'm going to show him exactly what this place can do, and what a properly trained cadet can do, even if that cadet is just a kid. You're going to run a combat simulation, in front of the judging panel. Not just any combat simulation. Her eyes gleamed with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that probably gave her teachers nightmares back on Earth. The Siege of Karthax 7. My respiratory slits seized up entirely. That battle killed thousands. 4 entire fleets were destroyed. It lasted 6 weeks and nearly collapsed the coalition defense line, which makes it the perfect demonstration. If I can successfully command through even a portion of that scenario, it proves the Academy's training programs work, that they produce results worth funding. You're 12. And I've spent 6 months studying every battle the Coalition has ever fought, running simulations in my spare time, and learning from actual combat veterans in the staff. I'm not going in blind. She paused. Plus, I have Gerald. The honey badger was investigating a holographic console, trying to bite the projection, and looking offended when his teeth passed through nothing. I failed to see how this helped. What possible tactical advantage does a honey badger provide? You'd be surprised. Mira called Gerald over, and he trotted to her side obediently. Well, obediently for Gerald, which meant he only tried to maul 2 holographic crew members on the way. Humans have been using animals in warfare for thousands of years. Dogs for detection and attack, horses for mobility, even dolphins for underwater operations. It's about psychology as much as practical application. Explain, watch. She activated a training subroutine I didn't recognize. Holographic enemy soldiers materialized at the far end of the platform. They were Krynoth warriors, tall and heavily armored, the kind of opponents that made experienced soldiers nervous. Mira pointed. Gerald, visitors. The honey badger's head swiveled toward the holograms. His body went rigid, muscles tensing beneath his fur. And then he attacked. Now, obviously Gerald couldn't actually hurt holographic projections, but watching him charge across that platform, making sounds that probably violated several galactic noise ordinance regulations, fur bristled to maximum intimidation mode, claws extended like biological knives, I understood something important. Fear isn't always rational. And sometimes the scariest thing on a battlefield isn't the biggest gun or the strongest armor. It's the small, fast, absolutely fearless thing that refuses to stop coming at you. The holographic Krynoth soldiers, programmed with realistic AI responses, actually retreated. Their body language showed confusion, hesitation. Gerald might not be able to damage them, but the simulation registered him as a threat. An unpredictable variable. Something that didn't fit normal combat parameters. Chaos theory, Mira said, calling Gerald back. He returned, looking smug in the way only a honey badger can. You introduce one element that doesn't follow standard tactical logic, and suddenly everything else becomes harder to predict. Enemies waste time and resources accounting for the unexpected. They make mistakes. That's actually brilliant, I admitted. Also completely insane. The best strategies usually are. We spent the next 6 hours programming scenarios, testing responses, and fine-tuning Mira's approach to commanding through impossible situations. I watched this human child coordinate fleet movements, allocate resources, adapt to changing battlefield conditions, and somehow make it look almost easy. Almost. There were failures. Plenty of them. Simulations where her forces were obliterated, where her tactics fell apart, where Gerald got distracted by a holographic bird and wandered off in the middle of a crucial maneuver. But each failure taught her something. She adjusted, learned, improved. By hour 5, she was actually winning scenarios that I knew for a fact had stumped senior officers. Where did you learn all this? I asked during a break while the system reset. My dad, he's a tactical officer, remember? I grew up watching him study battle plans and coordinate operations. When Mom got sick, he'd let me sit with him in his office while he worked. Said it gave me something to focus on besides hospitals and medical reports. Her voice got quieter. I started seeing patterns. The way successful commanders think. How they balance aggression with caution. How they adapt when plans fall apart. It was like solving puzzles. Except the pieces were ships and soldiers and the stakes were real. Your father would be proud. Hope so. Haven't heard from him in 8 months. Communication gets spotty when you're deployed in deep territory. She shook off the melancholy like shedding a coat. Anyway, that's why I can't let them shut this place down. It's not just about me. There are going to be other kids like me. Kids who need somewhere to go, somewhere to belong. The academy can be that place if they'd just let it. Gerald chose that moment to successfully destroy a physical training dummy he'd been working on for the past 20 minutes. Stuffing exploded everywhere. He looked immensely satisfied with himself. Your emotional support animal is a menace. Yeah, but he's my menace. 20 hours before the demonstration, my contact in technical services delivered the information we needed. The sealed contract Vrell had buried in classified files wasn't just a simple sale. It was a complete dismantling agreement with Gordex Industrial, a corporation known for buying coalition assets and stripping them for parts. The academy wouldn't just close, it would cease to exist. Every piece of equipment, every training module, every historical record would be sold off to the highest bidder. And Vrell's personal financial accounts showed a pending transfer that coincidentally matched exactly 12% of the sale price. We could take this to coalition oversight, I suggested. Have Vrell investigated. How long would that take? Mira asked. Months. Maybe years. Bureaucracy moves slow. We don't have months. The challenge is tomorrow. She studied the financial data on my datapad. Besides, even if we prove Vrell is corrupt, it doesn't solve the underlying problem. The academy is expensive. Someone else will eventually try to shut it down for legitimate budget reasons. So what do? We win so decisively that shutting down becomes politically impossible. We make the academy too valuable, too visible, too important to touch. You have a plan for that? Working on it. 15 hours before the demonstration, word had spread throughout the remaining staff and cadets about what Meera was attempting. Most thought she was brave. Many thought she was foolish. A few, mostly humans and species with similar stubborn tendencies, thought she might actually have a chance. The judging panel had been selected. 3 admirals from different coalition species, all supposedly neutral, though I suspected Vrell had chosen individuals who would favor closure. They would arrive in the morning, review the challenge parameters, and render judgment by midday. Meera spent those final hours in Section 9, refining her approach, memorizing unit positions, studying contingencies. Gerald mostly napped, conserving energy for whatever chaos tomorrow would bring. I handled logistics, making sure the demonstration area would be properly set up and that the recording equipment would capture everything for the official record. Around midnight, as I was conducting a final systems check, Meera spoke up from her position on the simulator platform. Karthax, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you helping me? You've got nothing to gain from this. If I fail, you'll probably get in trouble for assisting. If I succeed, you still lose your job here because there's no way Vrell keeps you on staff after this. So why? I had to think about that. The honest answer was complicated, tangled up in years of playing safe, following orders, never making waves. But there was a simpler truth underneath. Because you're right. About all of it. The academy should stay open. Vrell shouldn't profit from its closure. And someone should stand up for the cadets who need this place. I paused. Also, I've spent 30 years processing forms and fixing equipment. This is the most interesting thing I've ever done. She laughed, the sound echoing in the vast training space. Fair enough. Thanks for taking the risk. Thank me after we win. Morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything feel more significant, more real. The judging panel assembled in Section 9, looking around with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Admiral Thelsis, a Korthan with silver scales and 4 arms, seemed genuinely interested. Admiral Priss, an elderly Valkorian whose species specialized in strategic warfare, appeared skeptical but willing to observe. Admiral Court, a human male with gray hair and enough metals to qualify as armor, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Vrell oozed in last, his eye stalks practically vibrating with confidence. He expected this to be a formality, a child's desperate attempt that would fail spectacularly, allowing him to proceed with his plans while looking magnanimous for granting the challenge in the first place. Meera stood on the simulator platform with Gerald at her feet, looking impossibly small in the vast space. She had dressed in her formal cadet uniform, black and gray with the academy insignia on the shoulder. Her hair was pulled back, her posture straight. She looked scared. Good. Fear meant she understood what was at stake. Cadet Kowalski, Admiral Thelsis, spoke first, her voice surprisingly gentle. You understand the parameters of this challenge? You must demonstrate strategic capability beyond your years and prove the Academy's training programs have value exceeding operational costs. I understand, Admiral. The scenario has been randomly selected from historical coalition battles. You will have no advanced knowledge of conditions, enemy forces, or objectives. You must command through at least 45 minutes of simulated combat time, achieving a tactical victory or demonstrating exceptional decision-making under pressure. Failure to meet these conditions results in automatic challenge failure. Understood. One more thing. This was Admiral Court, his tone gruff. That animal stays off the platform. Gerald is my registered emotional support animal, sir. Regulations allow. I don't care what regulations say. This is a military demonstration, not a petting zoo. The creature stays grounded, or you forfeit. I saw Mira's jaw tighten. Gerald, sensing tension, made a low warning sound. This was going to get ugly. But then Admiral Priss raised a clawed hand. Coalition Military Code, Section 3, Subsection 8. Service animals accompanying cadets with documented need are permitted in all training exercises unless such presence creates documented safety hazards. Do you have documentation suggesting the animal poses such hazard? Court glared but said nothing. There was no documentation because Gerald, despite his temperament, had never actually injured anyone at the Academy. Threatened, yes. Intimidated, absolutely. But injured? Never. The animal stays, Priss ruled. Begin when ready. Mira took a breath, nodded to me, and I activated the tactical scenario simulator. The world changed. Suddenly we were in orbit above a burning planet. Warning klaxons blared. Damage reports flooded in. On the view screen, enemy warships swarmed like insects, their weapons tearing through coalition defensive lines. Scenario identified. The computer announced. Battle of Karthax. 7 Day 12, Hour 18. Coalition 4th Fleet. 72 vessels remaining. Enemy sovereignty forces. Estimated 200 vessels. Coalition objectives. Defend orbital stations. Prevent planetary invasion. Survive. I heard Admiral Thelxus make a surprised sound. This wasn't just a difficult scenario. It was considered one of the worst tactical positions in coalition military history. The officer who had commanded during the actual battle had managed to save 30% of his forces through a fighting retreat. Most simulation runners considered that an optimistic outcome. Mira studied the tactical display, her face unreadable. Gerald sat beside her, unnaturally still, as if he understood something important was happening. Computer, give me fleet status, station integrity, and enemy formation analysis. Data flooded the screens. Mira absorbed it all, eyes moving rapidly, processing information at a speed that seemed impossible for someone her age. Helm, redirect all ships from defensive grid pattern Sigma to strike formation Theta. Tactical, I want firing solutions on enemy command vessels, not their attack craft. Engineering, divert auxiliary power to forward shields on all capital ships. Communications, send priority alpha message to station commanders. Begin emergency evacuation of non-essential personnel. The orders came fast, confident. Around the platform, holographic crew members scrambled to comply. Ships began moving, reorganizing from a protective shell into something more aggressive. Cadet, Admiral Court interrupted. You're abandoning defensive positions. The stations will be vulnerable. The stations are already lost, sir. Mira didn't look away from her displays. Enemy has numerical superiority and better positioning. Trying to hold static positions means they can concentrate fire and destroy us piecemeal. We need mobility. That's a retreat. That's tactical repositioning. She made another series of commands. Ships began executing attack runs, focusing fire on specific enemy vessels. Computer, analyze enemy command structure. Identify flagship. A moment later, a vessel highlighted on the display. Large, heavily armored, positioned at the center of enemy formation. There. Mira pointed. That's what we hit. Kill the command ship, enemy coordination falls apart. You'll never get through their screening vessels, Admiral Priss observed. She wasn't criticizing, just analyzing. I don't need to. Mira typed rapidly on her control interface. Computer, calculate probability of enemy screening vessels recognizing and responding to non-standard threat vectors. Insufficient data for accurate calculation. Then guess. The computer paused, which was oddly human-like. Estimate 47% response effectiveness to non-standard organic assault. Mira smiled. Good enough. Gerald, ready? The honey badger's ears perked up. I suddenly understood what she was planning and immediately wished I didn't. You're going to project Gerald into a combat simulation. The TSS can generate any scenario element I program, including biological assets. Watch. She executed a complex command sequence, and suddenly, there were dozens of Geralds. Holographic copies of the honey badger began appearing throughout the enemy fleet formation. Small, fast, aggressive, and absolutely not following any known combat doctrine. The enemy AI, programmed to respond to military threats, tried to track them. Failed. The holograms were too small, too unpredictable. They couldn't actually damage ships, but the simulation registered them as active threats requiring response. Enemy vessels broke formation, trying to target the anomalies. Screening ships moved out of position. Point defense systems wasted ammunition on targets that couldn't be destroyed because they weren't really there. And while enemy forces were distracted by impossible-to-hit holographic honey badgers, Meera sent her capital ship straight through the gap. All batteries, concentrate fire on enemy flagship. Weapons free. The coalition fleet opened up. Energy weapons, missiles, kinetic projectiles, everything focused on one target. The enemy flagship's shields flared, held, then collapsed. The ship began breaking apart. Enemy coordination evaporated. Without their command vessel, individual ships started making independent decisions. Some retreated. Others charged forward without support. The cohesive assault became chaos. Meera exploited every opening. Her ships moved like surgical instruments, precise and lethal. She rotated damaged vessels to rear positions, brought fresh ships forward, adapted her tactics as enemy forces adapted to hers. 45 minutes passed. An hour. 90 minutes. The original battle had lasted 6 weeks. Meera compressed it into a 2-hour demonstration of tactical brilliance that had the entire judging panel watching in stunned silence. When the simulation finally ended, coalition forces held the field. 60% fleet survival, both orbital stations intact, enemy forces in full retreat. It was the best outcome anyone had ever achieved with that scenario. The training hall was absolutely silent. Then Admiral Court started clapping. Slowly at first, then with genuine enthusiasm. Thelxus and Pris joined in. Even Vrell, who looked like someone had just informed him his bank accounts had been frozen, managed a weak gesture of approval. Meera stood on the platform, breathing hard, sweat on her forehead. Gerald was curled up beside her, looking proud of his holographic copy's performance. Cadet Kowalski, Admiral Thelxus spoke formally. The judging panel rules unanimously in your favor. You have demonstrated capability beyond expected parameters and proven the Academy's training programs produce exceptional results. Furthermore, Admiral Pris added, we recommend immediate review of closure proceedings. An institution capable of developing such talent should not be shut down for any reason short of catastrophic failure. Admiral Court approached the platform, extending his hand. Meera shook it, looking dazed. How old did you say you were? He asked. 12, sir. Keep training. In 10 years, I want you commanding real fleets. He glanced at Gerald. Bring the Badger. That was the most unorthodox tactical innovation I've seen in 40 years of service. Vrell tried to slink away, but I blocked his path. In my hand was a datapad containing all the evidence of his corruption. Commander, the panel might also be interested in reviewing certain financial irregularities regarding the closure decision. His eye stalks retracted so fast I thought they might never come out again. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Military Academy remained operational. Vrell had been removed from command, pending investigation. A new commander was being assigned, and the facility had received full operational funding for the next decade, along with approval for expansion programs. Mira's father arrived 2 days after the challenge, having received emergency leave when he heard what his daughter had done. I watched them reunite in the main corridor. This grizzled tactical officer and his small, fierce child. He picked her up, held her tight, and I distinctly heard him say, "Your mother would be so proud." Gerald tolerated the emotional display for approximately 30 seconds before demanding attention. Some things never change. As for me, I was promoted to Director of Facility Operations. Turns out helping save the Academy looks good on performance reviews. Who knew? I found Mira one evening in Section 9, running more simulations. She was studying a particularly nasty scenario involving hostile environmental conditions and limited resources. "Haven't you proven yourself enough for 1 month?" I asked. "This isn't about proving myself anymore." She gestured at the tactical display. "This is about being ready. Because someday there's going to be a real battle, not a simulation, and people will be depending on me to know what I'm doing. You're 12. For now." She grinned. "Give me a few years." I left her there, this human child and her ridiculous honey badger, preparing for wars that might never come, ensuring she would be ready if they did. Because that's what humans do. They prepare, they adapt, they refuse to give up. They bring honey badgers to military demonstrations and somehow make it work. And they remind the rest of us, all of us who have gotten comfortable and complacent, that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't the biggest weapon or the strongest army. It's someone who refuses to quit. Even if that someone is just a kid with an attitude problem and an emotional support apex predator, the Academy would be fine. Meera would be fine. Gerald would continue being a menace to organized society. And I had the best story of my entire career, totally worth the risk.